Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
Just want to make sure we're going good. Now, we're going to kind of jump a little bit all over before we get deep into the news. Because again, I think it's important to look at things from a historical perspective and in context. And this world is so upside down, so backwards, so, well, the system is so broke, you ain't going to fix it. We need a complete change in mindset that we're really not going to get from any of the leaders that are out there right now.
No, and I mean, I think a lot of this fixing is up to us to change the system. We need to steer this bus in a different direction because we are the majority. I mean, we do have the power.
And again, that's when I'm just going to, give that one thought out there. Anytime we're looking for somebody else to come and do all the work for us, to save us, so to speak, then we're basically taking away from our own ability to save ourselves. And often we're waiting for something that is not going to manifest because it's not part of the bigger plan. This is all about self-empowerment. And we're looking at a representation of Mary Magdalene and Yeshua. Curiously, it looks like there's either an angel or a UFO over their shoulder in this. But I just wanted to share things. The message of Yeshua is all about heart-centered living and getting ready to step out of the dark age, the Kali Yuga, which is an age of unenlightenment. You got to realize that the powers that be that have been in control, and again, so to speak, the control of this physical world, because they are operating using their systems, their modes, their methods to control the reality that we find ourselves in. Yet we are all co-creators. And their methods are not benevolent ones that are heart-centered. Because, again, Yeshua came in the darkest night of the Kali Yuga to shed some light on humanity. And he was, again, an Essene. Who are the Essenes? Well, they were a certain type of people that recognized just how corrupt in those days the system was. And in those days, it was the Roman Empire that was dominating everything in that area. And so they tried to keep themselves outside of the system as much as possible. They lived a very ascetic life, and it did include voluntary poverty. And in some cases, abstaining from worldly pleasures, because they felt that you could be tainted by the system, corrupted by the system, and eventually kind of lose yourself to the system.
Very much so. Look at those other, it slips my mind right now, but those people who choose to still live outside of the system. And if there's anything that they want to bring into their societies, it's talked over through all the elders. It's not just say, okay, let's go ahead and, get TVs or get computers. No, it has to go through all of the elders. It has to be talked about. It has to be implemented. And they're just very, very careful as far as what they bring from the outside in. Amish, the Amish.
Yeah, the Amish, exactly. So this, is an interesting article, which I'm not going to go through the whole thing because we've talked about the most important parts of this so many times. When we look to the Vatican, right, 2,000 years of wealth accumulation from Caesar to now, right, it has nothing to do with Christianity. In the sense that, well, what is the method, the message of the one that we call the Christ? And again, Christ literally comes across as the anointed one. And really, if we look in deep, what is that anointing? Well, it's the anointing from the pineal gland. It's activated kundalini. It's the life force. And you could look into the works of Santos Bonacci and getting into the cerebral spinal fluid and the magnetic aspects of all that triggers that change in consciousness. So we can all be anointed, and that's the whole point, is that, we all do at some point in time become anointed ones. We activate our kundalini. We open up the chakras. The divine energy flows through us and our perception changes because we could have direct experiential knowledge. Gnosis with a G. And that leads to the scales being lifted from your eyes. Now, what we have in the world, though, is a system of wealth accumulation and control. And it's totally, totally the opposite. It has nothing to do with the real message of Yeshua. And again, we've brought it to light that originally his name was Yeshua. Most of the world knows him as Jesus, but if you yelled to him when he was on the planet, "Hey, Jesus," he wouldn't look, he wouldn't recognize it. Maybe in his ability to perceive different timelines, he would have understood that at some point in time in the future, people would start calling him by a name which he didn't recognize. And again, some of this is all totally, totally purposeful because it's all about claiming energies. It's all about claiming power for themselves. And this is what you had, was basically the church coming into being by Constantine the Great. And again, his vision of conquering under the sign of the cross. And throughout the ages, there's been incredible atrocities by the leaders of the church that have been perpetrated. Just look to some of the acts that we see that were committed by different popes. It'll blow your mind away. Absolutely nothing to do with the true Yeshua message. But we did get, by the way, that Yeshua did prefer red wine when he partook.
He did. He did. He has his preferences, just like all of us. He has, you can call them weaknesses or strengths, whatever you want to call it. He did have his preferences.
Most definitely. But, the only thing he owned was really just the rags on his back, so to speak.
People provided for him. They wanted to. It was like this desire to share and to take care of and help. They felt his energy.
Well, that is a tradition, too, in India, where, they take, again, the ascetics, these people that dedicate their entire life to pursuing meditation and understanding the workings of the mind itself and of our reality. They are provided for by the public at large. And, this is the same as it was with Yeshua. So when we look to the leadership of this world and the richest people like Elon Musk, all these faces, Bezos, this is Arnaud, and of course we know Gil Bates. You can't get farther from Yeshua, can you?
Right.
That's about as far from Yeshua as you can get. So obviously, if we're looking for great spiritual leadership, you're not going to find it. In fact, you're going to find the opposite. This is the path of service to self. And no matter how much they want to sugarcoat it and make it look like they're great philanthropists, are they really? That's the question. We talked about, too, Holodomor, which was a horrible thing that happened. And when the Red Revolution happened in Russia, and also it happened in China, there were millions and millions of lives lost. And we've been having the eyes on the Ukraine because of, obviously, the geopolitical situation that's going on there. Well, this was a systemic starvation that happened, and it is a horrible atrocity. Nearly, somewhere around 5 million people lost their lives on basically purpose. 5 million people, starvation in the Soviet Union, and that was between 1931 and 34. And, the focus is on Ukraine, which is a breadbasket. There's no reason for starvation. Absolutely no reason. And this is, these statues are about the Irish potato famine. Many of you might have heard of this. Maybe you haven't. It's also known as the Irish Holocaust. And it was so large, it was basically due to a blight that came in as people were relying on potatoes for most of their nourishment. Mm-hmm. And boy, do we have it good. We have had it so good in this world to be able to, have kiwis if you want, have pineapple, watermelon, things that are very, very seasonal in most parts of our world, anytime, any day. It's so wonderful to be able to have the diversity that we have. And there's no reason for a single person on this planet to starve.
No, there's not. Absolutely not. Because, I mean, look at a simple papaya. You open up that papaya and look how many more papaya seeds are in there. So,
hundreds.
Yes, hundreds. So Mother Earth is plentiful.
Yes, nature is bountiful. And you see this famine reduce the population of Ireland dramatically. And you could see here the population of Ireland was higher back in 1850 than it was in 1990s. It never recovered. This was massive. And when we look at it in historical terms, it led to tons of people and some of my relatives as well coming over from Ireland to try to just better themselves. When we look at migrants, we should have an understanding heart, because these people often are just the victims of tragedy that are, if not caused by more powerful beings, powerful in the sense of ruling on this planet and controlling things on this planet, they're just victims. Mm-hmm. So whether it's people coming over from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Iraq. Iraq lost 1/40th of its population since basically the first war was declared on Iraq. That's horrible. It's an atrocity. The Irish potato famine was caused by wealthy landlords who prize profit over people. These same mindset that you see with these billionaires that we have today, no matter how they want to make it look like they are, their hearts are bleeding, so to speak. And also, there's just a lack of compassion. This is all, what Yeshua's mission really is. It's about compassion, developing that compassion. Mm-hmm. And we had talked about Kuan Yin, and she's reached out, and anybody that wants to reach out to her, she's the bodhisattva of compassion. Mm-hmm. And again, a bodhisattva is a being that could merge back with source because it's on such a high vibrational frequency, but again, chooses not to because she has compassion and she wants to lift as many up as she can.
Well, that's where her center is. That's where she feels the most love and the most joy, is in that vibration of compassion.
And what's sad is there are those, because they might call themselves Christian, might look more favorably on beings like the popes and the cardinals with their rich lifestyles, and look at somebody like Kuan Yin and view it with a suspicious light. And that is so sad. That's the type of discernment that truly this world needs, so that we could get past calling anything that is of one label good and of a different label bad. Again, labels, they separate, they define, they delineate. We need to get past the use of some of these things in general. And here we see this is all talking about what happened. Meanwhile, the Irish watched with increasing anger as boatloads of homegrown, Irish-grown oats and grain departed on schedule from their shores for shipment to England. Food riots erupted in ports such as Youghal near Cork, where peasants tried unsuccessfully to confiscate a boatload of oats. At Dungarvan in County Waterford, British troops were pelted with stones and fired 26 shots into the crowd, killing 2 peasants, wounding several others. British naval escorts were then provided for the riverboats as they passed before the starving eyes of peasants watching on shore, their homegrown food going elsewhere. As the famine worsened, the British continually sent in more ships, more troops. Yes, would to God the government would send us food instead of soldiers, the starving inhabitant of County Mayo lamented. The Irish in the countryside began to live off wild blackberries. They ate nettles, turnips, old cabbage leaves, edible seaweed, shellfish, roots, roadside weeds, even green grass. They sold their livestock and pawned everything they owned, including their clothing, to pay the rent to avoid certain eviction, and then bought what little food they could find with any leftover money. As food prices steadily rose, parents were forced to listen to the endless crying of malnourished children. And that makes me think about an uncle of mine, who was one of many, I think 5 or 6. And the reason also why I say I think 5 or 6 is because basically he was given up for adoption. And, all the kids were, because they couldn't be taken care of. And, this is not going all the way back to these times, but, more recent times, and still the type of circumstances that people are brought up in that are so sad. It's just so sad when there is no reason at all. So I awoke this morning to a phrase popped in my mind as soon as I woke up. It was like somebody whispered in my ear, "Eminent domain." And I was just doing a Google search, and I do remember talking about this. The Stafford Act was put into effect back on March 13th, 2020, and it allows for the administrator of FEMA to, among other things, exercise the right of eminent domain to acquire not only the physical facilities it needs, like buildings and land and property, but also supplies, medicine, food, equipment, parts, take possession of them immediately. And, that, for whatever reason, I just felt compelled to bring all these things to light because, as you saw, starving people in Ireland had to watch their own homegrown food be loaded up on ships and sent abroad while they were starving and while their kids were starving. And again, we've been talking about preparation, and we don't want to promote fear, but know history and know the signs that are all around you. Look at the signs that are all around you now. It is so much better to be prepared now and getting ready and putting out the energy that hopefully the timeline gets changed and it won't be as bad as what we've seen in the past in the Ukraine or over in Ireland.
Yes, there's a very strong presence for us to tell you guys to work on these timelines, and with the understanding that our consciousness and our energy matters, it counts. They've just spent way too much time trying to tell us that it doesn't, and that you're just one person, and that what you think and feel does not matter, but that's not true. We can change these timelines. They don't have to be as severe.
And Laurel from the Galactic Federation was sharing this morning with us that we have changed, and when we say we mean this family, just this family, the Evolutionary Energy Arts family, has contributed to changing this timeline more than you can imagine. So, thank you guys for putting out your intention. Thank you for illuminating the minds and opening the hearts of others, because you are doing it. You're making a difference. So many beautiful people that we have had the blessing to get to know, and, there's so many names I just want to, just throw out there quickly that come to mind. I think of Marshall. I think of Marshall.
Definitely.
I think of Will. I think of Kristen. I think of Mary. I think of, gosh, there's
We think of Jan. We think of all of these people that have supported us and helped us. And, if we miss some names, we're sorry, but we really do
we could go on and on.
We could go on and on.
People that we've seen such growth in, like our brother Mark in Kansas. He's growing.
Sure.
He's growing leaps and bounds.
Yes.
And we see such growth in so many beautiful people, and you guys are just spreading your lights. You're sharing this with the world, and it's changing the world.
There's Karm, there's Raj, and yes, they do have very bright lights, and they do make incredible changes. And Miss Mary Sean, I always call her Mary Sean, but it's Sean Mary.
Oh,
but
yes.
She's been such a huge blessing to us too.
Yeah, there's so many of you out there, and we're sorry if we didn't get to name everybody. We didn't want to, it would probably take an hour to cover every single person. One of the things is time. And they are pushing, and when we say they, again, those on the upper realms, the G-Fed, Pleiadian High Council, and the Devas, and beings like Yeshua and Mary and the other Mary as well. And of course, White Buffalo Calf Woman, Kuan Yin, Aset, Lakshmi. These beings are all pushing to give us more time so we could get more prepared. April 8th, 2024 is going to be on a Monday, and that is 838 days away from us, 27 months, basically 2 years, 3 months, 17 days. So, what's big about that? Well, that's the second X. That's the X, and the X marks the spot. We were talking about those two eclipses, which feel so important. And also what is happening is the Pluto return. So just to, again, cover, remember that first eclipse that happened August 21st, 2017? And again, it's not quite 7 years, but many people have looked at this time frame as being the time of, the apocalypse, the big unveiling, the tribulation. It's all happening now. And I do feel that, again, this is a critical time for this country and also for the entire globe, obviously. So the second one happens on April 8th, 2024. Again, that's just 2 years and 3 months from now. That's not far off. And then we also know, obviously the forecast, the DEAGEL forecast for 2025. Again, they're working their dark magic, trying to make, the darkness stay around as long as possible. And so we have to anchor the light, and we can anchor so much light, but yet we do have to prepare.
Right.
I mean, you don't want to stick your head in the sand like an ostrich and say, no, nothing's happening, because you never know what might happen if you do that. So what we've gotten too from the guides is, yes, what they just sent me, like a little blurb of energy down through the crown chakra, is that 2022 is a massive year of change.
Huge.
This is a huge year of change. As much as 2021 was a year of change, 2022 is going to be even more dramatic, the changes that we're going to see. And the restructuring of this country, it's going to be basically the year that gives birth to something new. And, it is a key time. Like in February, there is a key date in this Pluto return. And also, February is a key time. Energies settle in and they take time to settle. So like when you have an eclipse, doesn't mean that something's going to happen during the eclipse. It's all about the energy happens, settles in, and then manifests as time goes on.
Right.
So again, these are key timelines. Believe you me, the elite know all about these energies. And they're all about utilizing these energies for their end, not necessarily for humanity's end. Again, it's all about control and power.
Right. And their education and our education is vastly different. They learn all of these things about the stars and about the astrology and numerology, and they play the matrix from that angle. And they give us our free education to become batteries for their institutions.
Exactly. So jumping into the news now, with all these things in mind, we'll look at the news and maybe we'll see things from a slightly clearer perspective, perhaps. U.S. judge once again is blocking the dates for men and stating it's just simply beyond the ability of any president to do what is trying to be done. So yet again, this is a tug of war. This is a marathon. So it's interesting. Now, this is a federal judge in Missouri, and this covers 10 states. So the states that this covers. Now, again, this is kind of interesting, and this is kind of critical. We were talking about New York. And actually, I do feel that New York, Northeast, it very well may stay together. As the country breaks up into little bits and pieces. Some have wondered, Will New Hampshire be able to be a lone bastion there of a different sort of energy, so to speak, than the rest of New England? And, going from New York on up, maybe, time's going to tell, but Cindy is seeing that um, the map that she was shown just even a year ago when we were talking about all these things is changing. And we've also gotten that timelines are changing. So you're having an effect. You could see that you're having an effect. But the states that are affected by this are, again, these are states that we've talked about as far as states that have spoken up and done litigation. And you have Alaska, Arkansas, Iowa, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. And again, the only one in that northeast juncture is New Hampshire, which is a tiny state, absolutely gorgeous state, beautiful state. So it's very, very interesting because we might find ourselves literally on opposite sides of borders and not able to perhaps freely travel and see family members that we always used to see. Because you might be in a different country, so to speak, in the future, even though it was at one time this country. Look at what happened in the Balkans. Look at what happened with the Soviet Union again. All of a sudden now, some of those countries are actually, when you look to like Poland and you look to like Latvia, Lithuania, they were all under the control of the Soviet Union. Now, basically, they're on the other side of the fence. But they might end up back on the other side of the fence shortly with everything that's going on. So we see they're going to distribute 500 million new tests. And I think he might actually be making a speech right now as we're making this video. There's going to be a lot of different things happening. And, there is a new wave coming through. And the states that are getting hit hardest with this new wave that it mentions are New York, New Jersey, and 6 New England states: Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and Rhode Island. And they actually have some of the highest compliance with the dates for men. He's going to announce, and we're talking about 46 because he's making announcements on response to the latest emergencies, and the plan to deploy 1,000 military medical professionals to hospitals, setting up new testing sites, and deploying hundreds of federal, that word over here begins with that particular letter. Part of, again, what we've been saying for a long time is you're going to start to get used to seeing people in military garb in your regular daily life as you go about doing your things. This is part of what's coming, not necessarily in all areas, but certain parts of the country for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that they've been kind of easing in and getting people used to. Again, you go back to that frog in boiling water scenario. They just sort of warm people up to it so it's not so disruptive and shocking that maybe we'll accept it.
Yes. And the Supreme Court asks number 46 admin to respond to the challenges to the OSHA date for men. And, again, this is a war of consciousness. This is a war of wills. And it's something, again, that is a marathon. In Austria, they're actually hiring people to hunt down certain people, to literally track them, hunt them down, find them, due to, again, the same thing that we've been talking about. And again, this is why we left where we left, even though we felt that it was a pretty good place to be for some of the earth changes. It became apparent to us that the geopolitical was the most important thing for the next handful of years.
Right. And we don't get timelines, we don't get dates, because when we're dealing with these kind of energies, they don't operate on the dates that we operate on. We have to go by feel and emotion to try to recognize approximate timelines.
And we see the Ontario premier can't get into his home because people are blocking him because they're not happy. And, they're not happy with the way things are going. And, people are speaking up and letting themselves be known. Again, we look back to that history. Look at what happened when the Irish were watching their homegrown food being sent over to England. That when your kids are starving, people get desperate, and it's understandable. And U.S. population growth is at a record low. And, we talked about the fact that if you go back to the 50s, and this is interesting, this next part, if you go back to the 50s, sperm counts have declined drastically. You might actually say, are Homo sapiens sapiens going to be an endangered species? Well, this study reveals the effects of the plague upon the land on sperm, and it drops it by another 37%. Less and less kids are being born, and there's reasons for that. There's many reasons for that. And there's a word here, mologic. And two of the billionaires that we're talking about own this maker of the tests. And the name is Malak. Sounds like Malak to me. It's interesting, the semantics on things. And, what we've gotten is that this is actually a very real being that you don't want to have any part of.
No, he's not nice at all. There's very ruthless, very cut and dry, very cold. Just an entity that you probably just keep it out of your mind.
Yeah, that just brings me back to that Austin Powers movie. Who does number 2 work for? Well, who does number 1 and number 2 work for?
Right.
Really, this is an entity that's very real, and whose energies actually end up overshadowing many people. Many people. And where is the bastion of freedom? Is it over in Japan? Because, as we've seen what's happening with these dates for men in Austria, and other countries are following suit. Be aware of things if you're in Germany and Poland as well. And perhaps in certain states, you want to be very aware. In Japan, their government's telling their citizens, please do not discriminate, which is, it's a good thing, for sure, because we are being herded into 2 different groups. And the way this is worded, it might get you thinking, uh-oh, Red Dawn? Americans warned about the risk of Russian invasion. Now, this is Americans in the Ukraine, just so you know, because the government has gone and warned people that have family members or they themselves are in the Ukraine that they do feel that Russia is planning to invade the Ukraine at some time in the relatively near future. So they are actually letting people know of this in advance, that it is a possibility. And here we see Russian army as global leader in modernity. And this is their defense minister speaking. This happened overnight quietly, that China and Russia now lead in like all the technology. Well, again, this is all part of a script that's ongoing. And of course, the powers that be are controlling all these different chess pieces. Hypersonic missiles incoming. Think about the wording that they're using, right? Russian defense minister. Well, yeah, because they're going to be loading them on ships and mass producing them. But just the wording, looking at that wording, it's Russian invasion, hypersonic missiles incoming. Again, sowing seeds, but not the seeds of potatoes.
Right.
Pentagon struck new contract seeking ways to counter Russian and Chinese hypersonics, report says. So if you look at this again, there was another test of the United States' hypersonic capabilities, and it failed again. And you keep seeing what's being put out there. It makes you feel like something could be very close. And again, they're always telegraphing everything that's coming. Meanwhile, natural gas prices in Europe smash all-time high. As you're looking at Paris, the city of lights, snow-covered, wintry scene. And we were talking about that 6.2 that happened yesterday and the technological enhancement, or even in this case, perhaps, initiation of the sequence. You see there's 83, including that one. So 82 aftershocks. It's ongoing. And we also did get that there is perhaps in planning another like event, another similar event. And one of our dear family members said, well, maybe they're trying to release stress. And you should see the look on Cindy's face, to that.
It's a nice thought.
It's a nice thought. But again, that's like saying, do you really think that Gil Bates and Soros and Bezos and Musk and all those, that they're really wonderful human beings that have humanity really as their number one top concern?
Yeah, they're just trying to help.
It's a nice thought.
Yeah.
It's a nice thought. There was this mysterious explosion that rocked central Illinois. Did anybody feel that? Hear it? One of our family members, Mike in Michigan. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
How you doing? He said that he heard some sort of big explosion. Him and his neighbors. This is in Michigan, in lower Michigan. So I wonder if they heard the same thing. Again, anybody out in that area, I'd be curious to see if you guys noticed anything last night. Wonder what it was. Was it just a sonic boom? Maybe. I don't know. Could be. And we have Comet Leonard, which had been a dud, but now is starting to brighten unexpectedly. Perhaps it's starting to disintegrate as it makes its closest pass. And as it says, holy gas, Batman. Yes. As it makes its closest paths, and maybe its demise when it gets really close to the sun. But perhaps this will become more eventful than we thought. The timing is certainly interesting, and it may end up disintegrating and fizzling, or it could brighten even more. We'll have to see. To find it, look to Venus and go look to the left of Venus. Interesting stuff. Interesting times. Comets are thought to be harbingers also of challenges. Let's just leave it at that.
Right, exactly. Definitely lots of changes going on.
So keep doing it. Keep changing timelines. Keep anchoring your light. Again, it's always darkest before the dawn. And we couldn't do this without you guys, and thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. And also check out Medicinal Foods. There's a link at the top of every video, and use the coupon code EEA and get a discount. And it does also support the channel.
It does, and we are so grateful for all of your support, especially with the thumbs up. Those things seem to be helping us lately.
Yes, yeah, do make sure you are subscribed and try to share. Wake up as many as possible. The more that we have putting out there, the seeds of light that will be growing, and eventually the light will overcome the darkness. And we've already, in some senses, won the battle, but we just have to get to that finish line. So keep preparing and being ready for whatever gets thrown at us.
Yes, be prepared.
As always, guys, much love. Namaste.
Namaste.